Guys, hear me out and then tell me I told you so. Days ago, in a video on our channel, I pretty much explained what Vice President Jagdeo and President Irfan Ali are telling the public does not add up. And I'm referring to their claims about the reason behind the local banks' closure of W.I.N party candidates' bank accounts. Well, it looks like the government has been exposed. Stick around and find out who has the government rethinking their strategy on the 1001 ways to paint Azruddin Mohamed as the villain of the century as he competes to dethrone the PPP government at the September 1 elections. You're watching the Final Takeaway Podcast edition, where we unpack what's behind the headlines and we do take a laid-back approach to discussing trending topics. As a reminder, subscribe for updates if you're tracking this story. What if I tell you again, the US sanctions do not apply to banks in Guyana or their financial transactions with the We Invest in Nationhood party W.I.N candidates? As a matter of fact, forget about what I'm saying for a moment. You'll hear directly from the U.S. ambassador to Guyana herself. Next, we'll walk you through Irfan Ali and Barrett Jagdeo's statements to Guyanese on why several banks have cut ties with individuals who are associated with Mohamed or his political party. Are you ready? Let's get to it.
We were not consulted. We were not asked. We have no opinion on the matter. The banks here make their own decisions.
That right there is a clear and unequivocal rebuttal of Ali and Jagdeo's claims that the banks made their decisions solely on de-risking to comply with local and international banking regulations and to supposedly avoid law enforcement actions by the United States in relation to the 2024 sanctions placed on Azruddin Mohamed and his father by the Treasury Department's Office of Foreign Assets Control, or OFAC. Let's bring in Vice President Jagdeo first.
You think any bank here will put the depositors' money or the people money at risk because of a few people, accounts that are associated with the Mohammeds? They have to do this. They have to de-risk themselves. Because when those banks globally say, you have those people here, that's a US sanctioned man, and people who are linked to him, they could suspend their correspondent banking relations. They can't transfer $1 abroad.
President Ali also expressed similar sentiments to Jagdeo as late as a few days ago at a rally.
More young people will receive letters of closures of their account from other banks. We warned you.
When they were supporting him, there was different. Now they're part of a formal organization headed by a US sanctioned individual. The banks have no choice whatsoever, or else they would lose their business with the US. That's the end of the banks.
The global community said to you, if by association you go this way, there will be penalties. They're blaming the government. We have nothing to do with that. We warned you.
So after hearing all of this, I want to ask you guys a few key questions. And feel free to let me know your thoughts in the comment section. Question 1. Is it at all possible, even remotely possible, that government officials are feeding the citizens of Guyana hogwash? Hogwash. Question 2. Are they misrepresenting the contents of the OFAC sanction documents to mislead the public or spread fear among Guyanese who they believe can be easily manipulated or gaslighted? And I guess you know what gaslighting means. It means someone telling you things to make you doubt what you have seen, what you have heard, what you have read, etc., etc. And gaslighters, who are usually narcissistic individuals, usually double down and call you out when you doubt what they tell you, and then they further gaslight you to make you think like you're going crazy, like you're losing your memory, like you didn't read what you read or saw what you saw, okay? So all of that, gaslighting is also a manipulation tactic that is used by narcissists, gaslighters, sociopaths, and of course it is used a lot in politics by politicians who want to brainwash the citizens. Question 3. Do you think this is all maliciousness and vindictiveness to suppress Mohammed's run for the presidency? And last but not least, question 4. Is it possible that the government sent out a memo to the banks ordering them to take these steps or face consequences? You heard for yourself. The ambassador contradicts the ongoing rhetoric by Guyana government officials, which were also peddled by the Attorney General and other officials. Let's hear more from Ambassador Terrio.
There is absolutely no association. The OFAC sanctions are for the U.S. They're the U.S. government, and they pertain solely to what happens in the United States and business being done in the United States. The decision by the banks here was entirely independent.
It was through a press release published on June 11, 2024, that OFAC officially announced it had sanctioned Azruddin and his father for alleged crimes and public corruption that occurred in Guyana. And of course, if you don't know or you do remember, that a PPP government official, a female named May Thomas, was also sanctioned along with the Mohamads. But moving on, days ago in a previous video, I pointed out that the published OFAC documents that I've seen and read said absolutely nothing about Guyana banks or other financial institutions facing the risk of sanction, penalties, or any other form of trouble for doing business with Mohammed or persons associated with Mohammed, such as his party candidates. They include those individuals whose bank accounts have already been unceremoniously and unilaterally closed by financial institutions in Guyana, such as Demerara Bank, the New Building Society Limited, the Guyana Bank for Trade and Industry, and Citizens Bank. Were also told that other banks plan to do the same. Whether their actions are just or unjust, or in violation of banking rules or clients' rights, is a matter for the courts. We understand that one or more WIN party candidates plan to sue or have already initiated legal action against one or more of these banks. It would be interesting to see a class action against these banks. And make no mistake, Guyanese are not ignorant. Guyanese read, Guyanese understand, Guyanese have sense. And especially in this age of technology, when you could simply look up something and read for yourself, of course from credible sources, it is a bit more difficult for someone to gaslight you or tell you something that is wholly untrue or tell you something that is partially true. You can literally do your own research and suss things out. So yes, this type of conduct by the government isn't sitting well with free-thinking individuals. And all of this is happening because the banks are supposedly protecting themselves from getting sanctioned or blocked by the US and OFAC for having financial links to Mohammed through his party candidates? Wow. Okay, you really can't make this stuff up. Now, let's talk about the main sanction implications in terms of who and what it affects, and whether or not it is true that candidates of the We Invest in Nationhood party can be lawfully or vicariously, that means through another individual, the individual would be Mohammed in this case, discriminated against due to their connection to Azruddin. To unpack this, let's look at a section of the OFAC press release, which was posted on the U.S. Department of Treasury's website. I've also placed a link below for you to read for yourself in your spare time, and do come back and tell me what you understand by or from this press release. For now, let's read a section of the document that deals with sanction implications. And if you're watching, you can feel free to read along. I know when it comes to podcasting or even videos, some people just listen while they, do other things, which is perfectly fine. You can listen on the go. This is a podcast, of course. In a section of the OFAC document labeled Sanctions Implications, the United States says, as a result of today's sanction, all property and interests in property of the designated persons, that's the sanctioned persons, described above that are in the United States or in the possession or control of U.S. persons are blocked and must be reported to OFAC. In addition, any entities that are owned directly or indirectly, individually or altogether, 50% or more by one or more blocked persons are also blocked. Moving on. Next it says, unless OFAC excuses a person or entity, OFAC's regulations generally prohibit all transactions by U.S. persons or within or transiting the United States, involving property, of course, with sanctioned individuals. So this part is speaking specifically about property and interests in property associated with sanctioned individuals. Those persons face sanctions or can be blocked or will be blocked by the U.S. as a result. Here is where we need to zoom in. The document says, in addition, financial institutions and other persons that engage in certain transactions or activities with the sanctioned entities and individuals may, not will, not shall, may expose themselves to sanction or be subject to an enforcement action. The OFAC document goes on to explain that both one-sided or mutually beneficial transactions or activities by financial institutions include those pertaining to money, goods, or services to or for the benefit of any sanctioned individual are also prohibited.
Read what it says there. Like people not reading stuff. The OFAC sanction was quite clear. It says financial institutions cannot deal with this man, or else they run the risk of being sanctioned by the U.S., losing correspondent relations. These are financial institutions. The banks are financial institutions. It says ordinary people run the risk of law enforcement action if they deal with him. How come they're not reading this?
Now here is the billion-dollar question. Where in this document do you see it specifically says anything about dealing with financial institutions overseas, or more specifically in Guyana or any other country but the U.S.? Okay, and this is only a part of the document. I challenge you to go and click on the link below to this document and read it for yourself from the top to the bottom. And if you see anything different, please come back to this video and drop me a comment in the comment section and call me out, okay? So some of you may already know this, but for those of you who do not know, sanctions can be lifted. On that note, Azruddin's sanction is not a lifetime sentence by OFAC. Also, he was never criminally charged for these alleged crimes. Like others, he can, if he hasn't already done so, apply to OFAC, and he can request that they remove him from the sanction list. So it's not a life sentence. It's not, oh my gosh, this is never going to go away. So when government officials make special time every week to talk about the sanctions, in how terrible they are, in how whatever it is they're telling the people about these sanctions and about Mohammed and the effects and the long-lasting consequences not only on Mohammed, but people that are associated with Mohammed or his party. To do what? To what end? Remember this video and come back to this video and remember the OFAC sanction document literally spells out what the sanctions are that were laid upon Mohammed and what are the consequences and who can be affected, who or what can be affected in relation to the sanctions placed on Mohammed. And no, it does not include, the document does not speak to banking institutions, financial institutions in Guyana. So make this make sense. Of course, if Mohamed applies to have the sanctions lifted, it's going to be a process. OFAC will have to review the application and the current status of a sanctioned individual, who in this case is Mohamed, to determine if he qualifies for removal from the list at this point in time. The sanctions also do not prevent someone, or in this case Mohamed, from running for office, for government office, or even the presidency. Yes, he can be president. He can very much become the president of Guyana, even as a sanctioned individual, since the laws of Guyana do not explicitly, if at all, block this from happening. Guys, we're about 3 weeks away from the September 1 elections in Guyana. Make sure you stay tuned for updates from this channel, because there's a chance things are going to intensify even more in the coming days, and you don't want to miss that. So stay tuned for updates, and of course, if you turn on your YouTube notifications, you will get instant updates from this channel. That's all we have for you today. Thanks for watching. See you in the next video coming right up.